4 years ago, my wife Sarah died in a car accident on her way home from work. I was devastated. I raised our 2 young daughters alone, went to therapy, tried to move on. But every single night at 2:17 a.m., I still hear her voice whispering my name from the hallway. At first, I thought I was going crazy from grief, until last week when I set up a camera and saw something that made my blood run cold. Because the woman walking down the hallway at 2:17 a.m. wasn't a ghost. It was my wife, alive, looking exactly the same as the day she supposedly died. My name is James. I'm 38 years old. I work as a civil engineer here in Denver, Colorado. 4 years ago, on a rainy Thursday night in October, my wife Sarah was killed in a car accident on the highway. A drunk driver crossed the median and hit her head-on. She was pronounced dead at the scene. I remember every detail of that night like it was yesterday. The phone call from the police, the way my knees gave out in the kitchen, the sound of our 2 daughters. Lily was 6 and Emma was 4, crying in their rooms because they didn't understand why Daddy was screaming. The funeral was a blur. Hundreds of people came. Sarah was beloved, a kindergarten teacher who everyone said had the kindest heart. I stood there holding my girls' hands, feeling like half of me had been ripped away. The first year was pure hell. I barely slept. I drank too much. I went to grief counseling twice a week. My sister moved in for 6 months to help with the girls. Slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild some kind of life. I went back to work. The girls started smiling again. We planted a small memorial garden in the backyard with Sarah's favorite flowers. But something strange started happening about 8 months after the accident. Every night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., I would wake up to the sound of Sarah's voice whispering my name. James. It was soft, gentle, exactly the way she used to wake me up when she came home late from parent-teacher conferences. At first, I thought it was a dream. Then it kept happening, night after night. Always at 2:17 a.m., always the same soft whisper. James. I told my therapist. She said it was common in grief. Auditory hallucinations caused by trauma. She suggested sleeping pills and mindfulness exercises. I tried everything. Nothing stopped it. Then, about 6 months ago, the whispers started changing. Sometimes I heard her laughing softly in the hallway. Sometimes I heard her humming the lullaby she used to sing to the girls. Once, I even heard her say, "The girls are growing up so fast." I started to question my sanity. I was terrified I was losing my mind. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not my best friend, not even the girls. I was scared they would think Daddy was broken. Last week, I finally decided I couldn't live like this anymore. I bought a cheap security camera and set it up in the hallway facing the stairs to the 2nd floor. I aimed it so it would catch anything moving at night. I told myself if I saw nothing, I would check myself into a psychiatric hospital the next day. The first 2 nights, the camera recorded nothing but empty darkness. On the 3rd night, last Thursday, the camera caught something. At exactly 2:17 a.m., a woman walked slowly down the hallway. She was wearing the same light blue pajamas Sarah used to wear, same long brown hair, same way of walking, slightly favoring her left leg because of an old ankle injury from college. She stopped in front of the girl's bedroom door, placed her hand gently on it for a few seconds, then continued down the hall and disappeared into the darkness near the guest room. I watched the footage at least 20 times, heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't a ghost. It was Sarah, alive, looking exactly the same as the day she died. I sat in the dark living room at 3:30 a.m., the security camera footage playing on loop on my laptop. The woman in the blue pajamas walked down the hallway again and again. Each time she paused at the girl's bedroom door, placed her hand gently on it, then continued toward the guest room and disappeared into the shadows. It was Sarah. There was no doubt. The way she moved, the slight limp on her left leg, the way she tilted her head, it was all her. Even the pajamas were the exact ones I had bought her for our 7th anniversary. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the mouse steady. I paused the video at the clearest frame and zoomed in. Same freckles. Same small scar above her left eyebrow. She was alive. My wife. The woman whose funeral I had stood at 4 years ago. The woman whose ashes I thought I had scattered in the mountains we both loved, was alive, and had apparently been living in our house for almost the entire time. The first emotion that hit me wasn't relief. It was pure rage mixed with crushing confusion. If she had been here for nearly 4 years, then when did the whispering start? Why only in the last 8 or 9 months had I begun hearing her voice every night at 2:17 a.m.? Had she only recently become bold enough to walk around more freely? Or had I only recently become aware of it because my grief had started to quiet down? I spent the rest of that night sitting on the couch, forcing myself to remember the timeline clearly. The first 3 years after the accident were a blur of pure survival. I was barely functioning. I drank too much. I barely slept more than 3 hours a night. The girls needed me constantly. If Sarah had been moving around the house during that time, it's possible I simply never noticed because my mind was too broken. But about 8 or 9 months ago, something shifted. The girls were more independent. I had finally stopped drinking. I was sleeping better. And that's exactly when the whispering started. James. Every night at 2:17 a.m. Now it made sense. She had been here the whole time, but only recently felt safe enough, or desperate enough, to come closer to our bedroom and the girls' room. I thought about all the nights I had woken up drenched in sweat, convinced I was losing my mind. All the times I told my therapist I was hearing things, all the sleeping pills I had taken. And all that time, my wife had been living in the attic above us, like a ghost in her own home. At 6 a.m., I heard Lily and Emma starting to wake up. I quickly hid the camera and tried to act normal. I made pancakes. I smiled when they told me about their dreams. I drove them to school like any other Monday morning. But the entire drive back home, my mind was racing with questions. How did she fake the car accident? Who helped her? Why didn't she trust me enough to tell me the truth? What has she been eating? How has she been showering? Does she watch us every day? When I got home, I went straight up to the attic again. This time I was calmer. I searched more thoroughly. I found a small notebook hidden under the mattress. Sarah's handwriting, the same neat, slightly slanted script I used to tease her about. I sat down on the edge of the narrow bed and began reading. The first entry was dated only 4 days after the funeral. Day 4. Sad. James, my love. I'm so sorry. They said if I didn't disappear, they would come after you and the girls. I had no choice. I had to die. Please forgive me. I'm watching over you from the attic. I can hear you crying at night. It's tearing me apart. I flipped through the pages. There were hundreds of entries spanning almost 4 years. She wrote about listening to Lily's first day of 2nd grade, about hearing Emma have nightmares and wanting so badly to go comfort her, about the night I broke down in the shower and she almost came down to hold me, but stopped herself because she was terrified of being seen. She also wrote about the real reason she faked her death. It wasn't a drunk driver. Sarah had accidentally discovered that the principal of her school was involved in a large-scale child exploitation ring. She had evidence, photos, messages, everything. When she tried to go to the police quietly, she was threatened. They made it clear they would hurt her family if she talked. In panic, she staged the car accident with help from a former student's father who worked at the coroner's office. They used a Jane Doe body, swapped dental records, and made it look real. She had planned to stay hidden for only a few months until the investigation was over, but the case dragged on for years. The principal was arrested, but his powerful associates were still free. Sarah became terrified that if she resurfaced, they would come after me and the girls. So she stayed. She had been living above us for nearly 4 years, coming out only when we were all asleep or out of the house, surviving on canned food, using a camping toilet, charging her phone with a small solar panel near the attic window. The most recent entries were the most painful. Month 45. James looks so tired. The girls are growing up so fast. Lily is starting to look like me. Emma still sleeps with the elephant I gave her. I don't know how much longer I can do this. I miss them so much it hurts to breathe. Tonight, I stood outside their door for 20 minutes just listening to them breathe. I almost went in. I almost ruined everything. I closed the notebook, tears streaming down my face. My wife had been sacrificing herself for 4 years to protect us, or at least, that's what she believed. Now I had to decide what to do next. I stood frozen in the dark hallway, staring at the woman I had mourned for 4 years. Sarah looked back at me, her eyes wide with shock and fear. The same eyes I used to wake up to every morning. The same eyes that once looked at me with so much love when we brought Lily home from the hospital. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us moved or spoke. Then she whispered again, her voice trembling. "James, please don't wake the girls." That sentence broke something inside me. I took one step forward. My voice came out rough, low, and filled with 4 years of grief and rage. "Sarah, what the fuck did you do?" She flinched at my tone. Tears immediately filled her eyes. She looked so small, standing there in her old blue pajamas, hair slightly messy, exactly like the woman I fell in love with. But now she felt like a stranger. "I can explain everything," she said. "But not here, not where the girls might hear. Come upstairs." I followed her up the narrow attic stairs, my legs feeling like lead. When we reached the small living space she had created, she turned on the camping lantern. The warm light illuminated the reality I still couldn't fully accept. A bed, a small shelf with books, a mini fridge, photos of our family taped to the wooden beams, a notebook I had already read parts of. Sarah sat down on the edge of the bed. I remained standing. "Start from the beginning," I said. "And don't lie to me anymore. I deserve the truth." She took a shaky breath and began. 4 years ago, she really had discovered something terrible at the school. The principal wasn't just embezzling money. He was involved in a network that exploited children. Sarah had accidentally found evidence on a school computer. When she confronted him privately, he threatened her life and the lives of our family. She panicked. She didn't know who to trust. She went to an old college friend who worked at the coroner's office. Together, they staged the car accident using a Jane Doe body. They swapped dental records and made it look convincing. "I thought it would only be for a few months," she said, tears falling down her cheeks. "Just until the investigation was over and the dangerous people were arrested. But the case dragged on for years. Every time I thought it was safe to come back, I heard new threats. I was terrified that if I resurfaced, they would come after you and the girls." I listened, my fists clenched at my sides. "So you chose to let us believe you were dead?" My voice cracked. "You let me bury an empty coffin? You let our daughters grow up thinking their mother was gone forever? You let me fall apart for 4 years?" Sarah started. I watched you every night, James. I heard you crying in the shower. I heard you telling the girls stories about me. I saw you struggle to be both mom and dad. It destroyed me. But I kept telling myself that as long as you three were safe, it was worth it." She looked up at me, her face wet with tears. "I was wrong. I see that now. I should have trusted you. I should have found another way. But I was so scared, and once I started, I didn't know how to stop." I sat down heavily on an old storage box across from her. The weight of 4 years of lies pressed down on my chest. We talked until the sun started to rise. She told me how she survived, sneaking down to the kitchen when we were asleep, using the guest bathroom when we were out, living on very little. She told me how she almost revealed herself 100 times, especially on the girls' birthdays and on the anniversary of the accident. The most painful part was when she described hearing me tell Lily and Emma that Mommy is watching over you from heaven. "I died a little more every time I heard that," she whispered. When the girls' alarm clock started going off downstairs, Sarah panicked. "You have to go back down," she said quickly. "They can't know yet, not like this." I stood up, my mind still spinning. Before I left the attic, I turned back to her. "Tonight, after the girls are asleep, we're going to talk again, and this time, we're going to decide what happens next. Together." She nodded, looking both terrified and relieved. That day was one of the hardest days of my life. I took the girls to school, went to work, attended meetings, answered emails, all while feeling like I was living in a dream. Every time someone asked how I was doing, I smiled and said, "I'm fine." But inside, I was screaming. That night, after tucking Lily and Emma into bed and reading them their bedtime story, I went back up to the attic. Sarah was waiting. We talked for hours. She told me she wanted to come back. She wanted to be their mother again. But she was terrified of the consequences, both legal and from the people who had threatened her. I told her I didn't know if I could ever fully trust her again, that the pain she caused me and the girls was immense, that part of me wanted to hate her for what she did. But another part of me, the part that still loved the woman I married, understood why she made those choices, even if they were terribly wrong. As the night grew deeper, I asked her the question that had been burning in my chest. "Do you still love me?" Sarah looked me straight in the eyes, tears streaming down her face. "I never stopped loving you, James. Not for one single day. Leaving you and the girls was the hardest thing I've ever done. It broke me." In that moment, sitting in the dim light of the attic, surrounded by 4 years of her silent suffering, I realized something painful but true. Love doesn't always die cleanly. Sometimes it survives through the worst betrayals, the deepest secrets, and the most impossible situations. We still had a long, difficult road ahead. We had to decide how to tell the girls. We had to deal with the legal consequences of faking a death. We had to figure out if our marriage could survive this level of betrayal. But for the first time in 4 years, Sarah was no longer a ghost. She was here. And we were going to face whatever came next. Together. The days after that first night in the attic blurred into a strange, suspended reality. Sarah remained hidden during the day. I continued taking the girls to school, going to work, cooking dinner, reading bedtime stories, all while carrying the heaviest secret of my life. Every evening after Lily and Emma fell asleep, I would quietly climb the attic stairs and sit with my wife, who was supposed to be dead. We talked for hours every night. Sometimes we cried. Sometimes we argued. Sometimes we just sat in silence, listening to each other breathe. She told me everything in painful detail. How she had planned the accident with her old friend from the coroner's office. How she had watched the funeral from a distance, wearing a black hoodie and sunglasses. how she had nearly broken down when she saw me carrying the urn of her ashes up the mountain. I told her how I had almost drunk myself to death in the first year, how I had stood in the shower many nights screaming into the water so the girls wouldn't hear, how I had kissed other women but could never bring myself to love anyone again because a part of me still belonged to her. The guilt between us was suffocating. On the 5th night, Sarah asked the question I had been dreading. "What do we do now, James?" I looked at her, the woman I had loved for 15 years, the mother of my children, the person who had both saved and destroyed our family. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Part of me wants to call the police right now. Part of me wants to hold you and never let go. Part of me wants to hate you for what you put us through." She nodded, tears falling silently. "I understand. I deserve all of it." We sat in silence for a long time. The only sound was the faint creaking of the old house and the distant hum of the city outside. Finally, I said, "We can't keep living like this. The girls deserve to know their mother is alive, but we also can't just bring you back tomorrow. There will be legal consequences, questions, media, possibly danger if those people are still watching." Sarah looked down at her hands. "I'm ready to face whatever comes, even if it means going to prison. I want to hold my daughters again, even if it's only once before they take me away." Her voice broke on the last words. That night, we made a plan. We decided to wait 2 more weeks. In that time, Sarah would write a full confession. I would contact a lawyer quietly. We would prepare the girls as gently as possible. And then, on a quiet Saturday morning, we would tell them the truth together. The 2 weeks felt like both the longest and shortest time of my life. Every night I went up to the attic, and every night Sarah and I grew a little closer to understanding each other again. Not as husband and wife in the old way, but as 2 broken people who still shared a deep love and 2 beautiful children. The night before we planned to tell the girls, Sarah asked me something I never expected. "James, if I have to go away for a while, will you still let me be their mother, even if it's only through letters and visits?" I looked at her for a long moment. "You never stopped being their mother," I said quietly. "Even when I thought you were gone, you were just missing, and now you're found." The next morning, a bright Saturday in early spring, we sat Lily and Emma down in the living room. Sarah waited upstairs until I called her. When she walked down the stairs, both girls froze. Lily's eyes widened. "Mommy?" Emma dropped her stuffed elephant. Sarah fell to her knees in front of them, crying so hard she could barely speak. "I'm so sorry, my babies. Mommy had to go away for a long time to keep you safe, but I never stopped loving you, not for one single day." Lily was the first to move. She ran into Sarah's arms, sobbing. Emma followed a few seconds later, burying her face in her mother's neck. I stood there, watching my family, broken, confused, but finally whole again, and felt tears streaming down my own face. The weeks that followed were chaotic. Sarah turned herself in. The legal process was long and painful. Because she had faked her death to protect her family from a credible threat, and because she had evidence against the original criminals, the charges were eventually reduced. She received a suspended sentence and probation, but had to do community service and counseling. The media storm was brutal for a few weeks, but it eventually died down. Sarah moved back into the house, but not as my wife. Not yet. We agreed to take things extremely slowly. She slept in the guest room. We went to family counseling together. We learned how to be parents again as a team. Some nights we argued. Some nights we held each other and cried. Some nights we sat on the porch in silence, just grateful to be breathing the same air again. The girls adjusted in their own ways. Lily was angry for a long time. Emma was clingy and scared Sarah would disappear again. But slowly, with patience and honesty, they began to heal. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the day Sarah died, we did something different. Instead of lighting candles for a ghost, we went back to the mountain where I had scattered the fake ashes. This time, Sarah came with us. We stood together as a family of 4, looking out over the valley. Sarah spoke first, her voice steady but soft. I made terrible choices out of fear. I hurt the people I love most. But I'm here now, and I promise, every single day for the rest of my life, I will choose honesty. I will choose you. Lily took her mother's hand. Emma took mine. I looked at the woman who had once been my everything, then became my greatest pain, and was now something new. Not the same Sarah I married, but someone stronger, someone who had survived her own darkness, and maybe, just maybe, someone I could learn to love again. Not because the past didn't matter, but because sometimes love isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about choosing to carry it together. As the sun set behind the mountains, I whispered the words I had whispered to her ghost for 4 long years. I'm still here, Sarah. This time, she whispered back, So am I, James. So am I.